Welcome to Woodworking. I'm Ben. We are going to continue on with our simple cabinet project in Fusion 360. And this will be a quick video probably. We're going to add a back to the cabinet. It's a simple task, but there's one little subtlety that I want to cover that kept me from including it in the last video. If you haven't seen part one of the simple cabinet, check that out first. By all means, please go back and do that. But this is going to finish off that cabinet, or finish it off for now. Apologies if you can hear my 3D printer going. I am printing up a mortising template for a project that I'm working on, and to be entirely honest, it is just based off of the mortising template we did in episode 1, and I just changed some parameters and I'm printing it right now. So speaks to the power of bringing a 3D printer in your wood shop. So let's swap over to Fusion, and right here you can see my updated mortising template that's printing right now. But we're gonna just click on episode 2 case. That was where we left off the last time. And one thing I'm going to do is I could save as, and that would make an entirely different project, but that would also fill up one of my 10 slots over here. I'll just move the project around a little bit, and maybe I'll even just hide a body. And now I'm going to hit save, and you have to do something legitimate in order for this window to pop up. Until you change something, Fusion doesn't think you've done enough to warrant a save, reasonably so. I'm going to click milestone, and I'm going to call that one add back. And what this does is you can now very easily jump between different versions. So you can see it's uploading to the cloud there. And then right here are the different versions. And when you save a milestone, it saves all of your saves, but the milestone just makes it more apparent to get back to when you need it. I like saving milestones when I am doing large changes to a project. So I'm going to unhide that body so I don't get confused later, and I'm going to save it again. Save often and save frequently. Okay. So we want to add a back to this cabinet. And what we're going to do is we're going to add a rabbet to that back side on all 4 of these boards. And then we're going to just put a plywood back in for now. You would think that you could, and you can easily just create a new sketch based off of that face right there. I'll even undo that. And if you see, I select a face and I click create sketch. And now this sketch is happening on that plane. But the hard thing about it is you can't really base any of your sketch elements off of the original sketch. If you look, it snaps to it at the bottom, it's snapped to it on the side, but it's not going to be a parameter that changes with the rest of the cabinet. So one thing that you could do is you could, I'm going to go right back around to the back. You could select all of these sides, and I'm going to hit P to bring up the project tool. It looks like project, it's project. And what that's going to do is that is going to project these elements onto my new sketch. And this is a great way of doing things. Sometimes there's no way around using that project tool. I'm going to undo that though, and I'm actually going to undo that sketch because I have found, especially with furniture, something simple. It is by far best to keep as many elements on the main sketch as possible. And by that, I mean as many elements without it getting overwhelming as possible. So here's our main sketch, and it's not too chock full of elements. It's not an overwhelming number of things to look at. I have had some sketches in projects for the combat robots that my son and I build that are just so over the top, overwhelming. You can't tell what's what. But we're not anywhere near that point with this sketch. So it's going to make it easier in the long run to do as much as you can off of this first sketch. There's definitely going to be some things you got to think about though when you're doing it, especially because this sketch again is on the front of the case and we're working on the back of the case right now. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to double click that outer case, and I am going to do an offset. And I'm going to offset this line 0.25 inches. So we have right now, actually, let's look. Our parameters, the case thickness is 3/4 of an inch, right? So if I offset this 0.25 inches, or 1/4 of an inch, that's totally fine. But you just need to keep in mind that if for some reason you wanted to change that case to 1.25 inches thick, that is still going to be 1/4 of an inch. That rabbet is still going to be 1/4 of an inch from that side. So what I might actually do is I am going to go to change parameters, and we're going to, so we've undone, and so we're back to 3/4 of an inch there. I'm going to make a new parameter. I'm going to call it rabbet, and I am going to say that parameter is the case thickness divided by 3. So the rabbet that we make with the parameter will be 1/3 of whatever the case thickness is. So here, up here, you could see that's where that dimension landed. And instead of it being 0.25, I'm going to make it rabbet. And it hasn't changed, right? Because that was 0.25 was 1/3 of 3/4. But now if I go and I change the case thickness to, let's just be weird and do 2 inches. Now this rabbet is still case thickness divided by 3. So it is 0.667. And that is 1/3 of the initial thickness. So let's change this back to 3/4 of an inch and close that out. So we now have this offset line that is just perfectly offset from the outside line or the outside rectangle, right? So that's really all that we need to base our rabbet off of. So let's go and we're going to show our bodies again, or we're going to show our components again. Sorry. And hide that construction line. So now our sketch is showing. If I hide that sketch, we're back to our normal cabinet. Our sketch here, what we're going to do is I'm going to select all of these elements of the rabbet, or no, I'm sorry. I'm going to select all of the inside elements of the rabbet. And I'm going to extrude. Now, instead of extrude, you know, if I extruded and cut, it would cut it from the front, right? That's not going to work. We don't want that at all. We want to extrude it from the back. So we're going to use an offset in our extrude. All 4 of those rabbet elements and spin around back. And we're going to say extrude. And I want to make sure that we are on the overall, or we're either on the overall component, if you will, or on the case component. And I am going to, instead of it working off of the profile plane, which is the plane that the sketch is on, I can't extrude the back from the front, right? I am going to do an offset. And I'm going to do the offset of the depth. And what that does is now everything that we do, everything that we extrude is happening the depth of the cabinet back. So it's 12 inches or whatever that depth is set to. And if I extrude here, right like that, you can see it is pulling it off of the back. So if I go to case thickness, and I need to go to minus case thickness, and that is a cut, case thickness, which is 3/4 of an inch, offset the depth of the cabinet. I'm going to hit OK. And there we go. There is our rabbet. And it just makes things simpler. I know this seems weird, but if you start projecting faces onto the back in order to base your sketches off of, it creates a very unstable connection at times, because later on down the line, a week, 2 weeks, months from now, you might go and delete one of these elements, and that rabbet gets deleted as well, because that element is required for that projection to happen. So again, when I can, I base as much as I can off of as few sketches as possible. So again, we've got our sketch here. This is our main sketch, and I'm going to hide my elements. That's our main sketch. That's our rabbet. And we offset that extrusion from the back. So now that we have the rabbet in our back, I want to put a back in. I want to make a piece of plywood that size to fill that, right? So what we're going to do is I'm going to do this inside the case component. So I've got this case component selected, and our sketch is still shown. And since that case component is selected, everything else is kind of grayed out. But I'm going to select all of the elements of the back that I need. And we need to select our rabbet, because that piece of plywood is going to fill that rabbet. And I'm going to leave that one off for now, just to show you something later. So let's scroll around, and we're going to go again. We are going to, instead of on the profile plane, which is the front, we are going to offset the extrusion, the depth. And what we're going to do is we are going to extrude this piece, and this extrusion is going to be case thickness deep, right? No, not. Oh. Is going to be case thickness deep, and I want to make a new body to go inside that case. And if you look, I'm screwing up right here. I am extruding it the wrong way. I need this to be negative case thickness deep, and I don't want to join. I want to make a new body. I'm going to click OK, and now we have a fifth body in our case. That is the back. So if we hide the other bodies in our case, there we go. We have a back that is 3/4 of an inch deep, and it is the exact width of our rabbet. So show everything again, and there we go. We have a plywood back for our cabinet, and that's pretty much all we need to do on this cabinet. This is a solid cabinet. It's a nice little cabinet. Let's see, we're going to change parameters, and we're going to make it 20 high, and we're going to make it 24 wide, and we're going to make it 8 deep. And there we go. Okay, so we have this weird little cabinet, and scroll around back, and we're missing that little section. That's right. I totally did that on purpose. I legitimately did. Because I wanted to show you something. I want to show you this down here. This is your timeline. And this is an extremely powerful tool in Fusion 360. You can just easily go back and forth however much you want. And one thing that's great is every component has timelines too. And so this, if I have the main project selected, this is our entire timeline. If I select the case component, these are the timeline elements that we can edit in the case component. What we want to do is we want to go back in time and redo it. We would make sure that we had that first thing selected. And this happens a lot. It just happens. So one thing about the timeline that's wonderful is you can click on something and click edit feature, and you're redoing that thing. And I can easily just click shift and select that element. And heck, I can even deselect an element, hit OK, and it redoes the thing. And there's that, right? If I don't like that, I can hit edit feature, just right click on that edit feature and reselect the missing piece. And there we go. You can even go so far as to edit feature and make it a join as opposed to a new body. The problem with that is that made all of those elements, one, because that back is now joined to every single element and it just screws everything up. So again, I'm just going to go back and edit that element and click new body. And there is our case, 4 sides with the back. We've got our doors and we've got a weird little cabinet here, but I would call this done. So that's about...
Add a shelf.
I knew he was going to chime in at some point. You're right, Vic. We should do a shelf, because this is these parameters. This is weird looking. Let's go back to 36 and let's go to 42 and let's go to 12. And here is an okay looking case, but it might be good to have this in the bathroom or something. And you kind of want a shelf on the bottom to put toilet paper on or something, right? So Vic wants a shelf. Vic gets a shelf. This adds a complication though, but I'm going to go to change parameters and I'm going to add a parameter. I'm going to say shelf height. And let's say 6 inches for now. Hit OK. Now, we got to go back into that original sketch. And this is one reason why I really, really like doing it all on one sketch if I can. I want this shelf to be on the bottom, right? I'm looking at this and I've got my door styles here. This door style is 6 inches or whatever that setting is from the bottom. And I need a shelf here and I want the whole door to move up, right? I can't move this line up because A, it's all locked down. And B, the door is based off of it. So I need to move up the elements of this door. So what I'm going to do is I am going to click away and I'm going to right click on that dot. There's this dot, and this dot. I'm going to right click on one of those dots and I'm going to say delete coincident. And what that does is it makes it so it's no longer locked to that line. Now that style no longer exists and is not locked to the base or to the cabinet bottom. I'm going to delete that coincident and move that up. And this one, I can try and delete that coincident, but I still can't move it because it was center to center. If you look, there is this constraint here, and that's the middle constraint or the midline constraint. And I need to get rid of that. So I'm just going to select it and hit delete. Now I can delete this coincident and move it up. And another thing that I would like to do is, now that these 3 are just floating around willy-nilly, I want to just make sure that they stay the same length. So I'm going to select the 3 of them. I'm going to click the equal constraint up here. And now they will be equal. If one of them moves, the others move as well. They're locked together. Let's add a shelf. So just go from the side. So just now I clicked it and it intersected with these lines right here. And it's easier to keep from creating intersections if at all possible. So we need 2 sides of our shelf, a top and a bottom of the shelf. And I am going to dimension those as case thickness. And now I can move these styles down, right? And we've got this style back, the bottom style back, and the left style, but the bottom style is no longer the size of the bottom style we want because the top of this style is still dimensioned to the top of this board. So I need to delete that dimension. So I'm just going to click on that dimension and hit delete. And actually, I'm going to undo that and double check that that dimension is bottom style. So I'm going to click on that and hit delete. And now I'm going to redimension this bottom style as the bottom style. And we're back to the 6 inches set in our parameters. And now if you look, this line is blue and the 2 lines of the shelf are blue because they're still missing a dimension. They're not fully constrained. And that's because this is able to move around however much I want it. So I'm going to dimension that bottom to the shelf, and I want that to be shelf height. And there we go. Now, if I click Finish Sketch and I get a bunch of errors down here, it's okay. If I hit Finish Sketch and I get a bunch of errors down here and the styles are now missing, that's because I've messed with the perimeter, not the parameter, the perimeter of those bodies. And it no longer knows what the selection was to make those bodies. And if that happens, it's as simple as going back into your timeline. One of them will be red, and you edit that feature in the timeline. And then you just simply reselect the missing perimeters or the missing elements. I'm going to click Finish Sketch, and I'm pretty confident. There we go. We have the door is intact, but we don't have a shelf because we haven't extruded it yet. So I'm going to show you a different way of extruding things. We'll do it 2 ways. Let's bring our sketch up. So there is the element of our sketch for the shelf. Up till now, I'm pretty sure what we would do is we wanted it to go to, we want the shelf to be depth deep, but we have the rabbet now, right? So actually, let's just do it. Let's just do it. Let's do it this way. We're going to go depth deep, and we're going to say new body. And I'm going to make sure that I am in the case component and hit new body. And there we go. But boom, it's poking out the back. That back, if I hide the back, it's too far. We really want to go to that rabbet, right? So there's 2 ways of doing this. We could very easily right click and hit edit feature. And we could say depth minus case thickness, which is the depth of that we use for the rabbet, and do that. And there we go. That is what we needed to do. Or a little bit less stable way of doing it, but 99% of the time it's going to work. Let's redo that. Let's edit that feature. And instead of going to a distance, we're going to say the extent type over here is to an object. And now the next thing that I click is going to be how far that extrusion happens. So if I select that rabbet, there we are. That's all it is. It is just saying, it doesn't even have a parameter. It's just saying, however, it's extruding it, however far back that rabbet goes, and hit OK. Now I'm going to keep the back hidden so that we could double check. It's good to do this every now and then. Double check that an 18-inch. Yep, there we go. And let's say the shelf is 10 inches tall, and go back around. We still have the bottom style that is 6 inches tall or whatever. And there we go. I don't like the way that that looks. I think maybe 7 inches, and let's do 14 inches and show our back. And now I'm going to hide that sketch. Now we have a nice little bathroom cabinet that you could put toilet paper in, and when shrinkflation happens again and toilet paper manufacturers make the toilet paper somehow more narrow, you can update your model if you haven't built the actual case piece yet. But boom, there we go. We have created a back for our simple cabinet. We've created a shelf. The full thing is parametric, and we're good to go. So as always, one more thing, Ben, one more thing. Let's say all of a sudden you didn't want the shelf. You could go into parameters, and you would think, oh, well, if I do 0, it's going to move it to the bottom. And it did, but it moved the outside case and the shelf to 0. So I'm going to undo that. And what you really need it to be is you need it to be case thickness down. And I'm going to change that to minus case thickness. And there it is. Now, the shelf still exists. You can see it there. The outs of the back of that shelf is still right there. You could just hide that body, and there you go. Visually and in the model, really, that shelf is now gone. If you wanted the shelf back, bring the body back, go to case parameter, and do 7. And there you go. That's how you get rid of a shelf that you've made too. All right, back to the outro. As always, I am going to hit save, and that file will be available on woodworking.com, link in the doobly-doo, and a full step-by-step how-to will be there as well. So check it out, woodworking.com. Thanks so much. The next project we do is going to get really, really juicy. We're going to do a shaker style table that's fully parametric, and we're going to have a lot of fun with it. So be on the lookout for that. Thanks.